Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are talking about a massive win for humanity. We often hear bad news, but right now, I want to show you how one country, Sierra Leone, completely changes the game for girls' education. I made this video to explain the mechanics of it. There is so much more to the story. Let's watch the first part together and then we will break it down.
For decades, education systems across parts of West Africa operated through local gatekeepers. School administrators and community leaders enforced strict, deeply entrenched stigmas, and doors to the classroom were firmly shut to anyone who didn't fit the mold. If a girl became pregnant, or if a child had a physical disability, the rules were absolute. They were expelled. They were permanently locked out of the system. When you banish a student for a single life event, the penalty compounds. Removing their access to foundational skills effectively caps their lifetime earnings, passing a deficit of opportunity down to the next generation. Governments eventually realized that well-meaning passive policies designed to offer basic equality were failing to solve the problem. Building more schools didn't matter if marginalized students were still legally barred from entering them.
Okay, let's pause there. First, let's look at some vocabulary. The video used the word stigma. A stigma is a strong feeling of disapproval that most people in a society have about something. It's like a negative label. Then, it used the word compound, which means to increase or worsen the problem. The video also talked about gatekeepers, people who control who gets in and who stays out. Now, let's give this some real-world context. The presenter makes it sound a bit abstract, but in Sierra Leone, this was a very harsh reality. During the terrible Ebola crisis around 2014 and 2015, schools had to close. During that time, teenage pregnancies went way up. When schools finally reopened, the government at the time literally banned pregnant girls from going to class or taking their final exams. There were the gatekeepers enforcing that stigma. It meant that one mistake or difficult situation ruined a girl's entire future. She was locked out forever. But thankfully, that wasn't the end of the story. Let's keep watching.
This logic model compares two ways of distributing resources. On the left, we see equality. Resources are handed out identically, regardless of where each person starts. On the right, we see equity. Equity allocates resources disproportionately to bridge those starting gaps. It gives marginalized students exactly what they need to succeed, rather than giving everyone the exact same thing.
I absolutely love this visual. It's so simple but so powerful. For our English learners, let's look at the word disproportionately. It's a big word, but it just means in a way that is unequal or out of balance. We also have the word marginalized here in the sentence, marginalized students. It means students who are treated insignificantly. Here is why this difference between equality and equity is so important. Imagine you have a class of students and one of them has bad eyesight. Equality means giving every single student a pair of glasses. That's fair, right? But it's not helpful. Equity means giving glasses only to the student who actually needs them, so they can see the world like everyone else. In Sierra Leone, leaders realized that just building more schools, equality wasn't enough if the most vulnerable girls were still too ashamed or too poor to walk through the doors. They needed extra targeted help. They needed equity. Let's see how they did it.
To actually break generational poverty, leaders had to move past passive acceptance of the old rules. They had to mandate an aggressive structural teardown of the barriers, a strategy known as radical inclusion. In Sierra Leone, the government took power away from the local gatekeepers. Through top-down authority, they made equity the law of the land. The core of this new mandate was specific and strict. Pregnant girls and adolescent mothers were granted a legally protected pathway back into the education system. A law on paper doesn't change a classroom overnight, By 2025, evaluations showed that rigorous government monitoring and professional training were forcing a psychological reset. Teachers began moving away from their roles as gatekeepers, repositioning themselves as advocates for the students they used to keep out. The physical classroom adapted to support them. Teachers implemented structured, data-driven coaching, creating specialized networks to ensure that young mothers had the targeted, hands-on help needed to keep up with their peers. A government mandate can force a physical door to open, but the shift in classroom culture dictates whether a marginalized student actually stays in their seat.
Alright, let's break this down. The key vocabulary here is top-down authority. This means the decision is made at the very top by the president of the government, and everyone below has to follow it. The video also called this policy radical, which means that it is very new, different, and against what is considered normal. The word advocate was also mentioned. It means to publicly, in front of everyone, recommend or support something. And it truly was radical. In 2021, the government of Sierra Leone officially launched a policy literally called radical inclusion. They didn't just suggest school take these girls back. They made it the law. But here is the most fascinating detail the presenter only touched on. Changing the law is easy. Changing human psychology is hard. Imagine being a teacher who spent 20 years believing pregnant girls belonged outside the classroom. The government had to put these teachers through intense retraining to switch their mindset from being a punisher to being an advocate. It was a massive cultural shift inside the schools.
This aggressive approach to keeping girls in school is scaling across the continent, driven by the UN's Education Plus initiative spanning sub-Saharan Africa. This conceptual model visualizes how secondary education acts as a socio-cultural vaccine. You can see a student at the center developing a defensive perimeter. As she stays in school, this shield actively deflects incoming social risk factors like HIV infection and early child marriage. By surviving those risks and completing secondary school, a young woman gains the hard skills necessary to secure her own economic autonomy later in life. This dual-axis chart plots the compounding macroeconomic effect. As a girl's timeline in education extends along the bottom, the curve representing the nation's economic yield rises sharply. Economists define this as the gender dividend, a direct investment in the future GDP of the nation. Radical inclusion functions as an aggressive macroeconomic tool. By capturing the lost potential of marginalized students, a developing nation can trigger a permanent lift in its long-term economic trajectory.
This is where the maths gets really exciting. Let's grab two quick vocabulary concepts. Sociocultural vaccine. You know, a medical vaccine protects your body from a virus. Well, a sociocultural vaccine protects a person from societal dangers. And gender dividend is an economics term. A dividend is a reward or profit you get from making a good investment. Let's look at the real impact of this. When the video says school acts like a vaccine, it means that school is a physical safe zone. If a 14-year-old girl is sitting in a math class at 2 p.m., she's not being forced into an early child marriage. She's not out on the street exposed to HIV. The school is her shield. And that's gender dividend, that's the economic payoff. When Sierra Leone keeps this girl in school, they grow up to get better jobs, they start businesses, and they pay taxes. The whole country actually gets richer just by treating girls fairly. It's not just charity, it's the smartest economic investment a country can make.
Top-down government mandates and macroeconomic theories work well at an institutional level, but they struggle to sustain long-term cultural change on their own. Lasting momentum requires a bottom-up component. This is driven by organizations like CAMFED and its vast alumni network, led by figures like Angeline Muramirwa. This cyclical flowchart maps their perpetual motion machine. It begins with an isolated data point receiving exact support to move through the education pipeline. After graduating, she returns to mentor the next generation, re-entering the pipeline and multiplying the effect. This entire model runs on lived experience leadership. The individuals best equipped to dismantle systemic stigma are the women who have directly survived it, and who are now using their autonomy to shape their local economies. Systemic exclusion is a policy choice. By actively choosing to legally and culturally protect the most vulnerable, nations trigger a permanent, self-sustaining engine of human potential.
Whoa, what a way to end. Let's quickly define bottom-up. If top-down is the government making rules, bottom-up is the regular people in the community creating change from the ground level. A perpetual motion machine is an engine that just keeps running by itself forever without needing new energy. I want to give you a real story behind that woman mentioned in the video, Angeline Murimiwa. This is a real person. Growing up in Africa, her family couldn't afford to send her to secondary school, but an organization called Camp Fed stepped in and paid for her education. She survived the system, got her degree, and guess what? She is now the CEO of Camp Fed. She runs the very organization that saved her, and she built a network of hundreds of thousands of African women who all graduated because of this program. And now, they pay it forward by mentoring the next generation. That is the engine of inclusion. So if you ever feel like the world's problems are too big to solve, remember Sierra Leone, remember Angeline. We can open the gates. If you enjoyed this breakdown and learned some new English today, make sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.